Good morning, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to this webinar. This event is a joint initiative between the Institute of Advanced International Studies at the University of World Economy and Diplomacy in Tashkent, the Andiana Foundation in Washington, D.C., and the Afghanistan program at the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies at the University of Notre Dame. I want to extend special thanks to Dr. Akram Umarov, Deputy Director of IAIS. This event is basically the result of a conversation I had with him, and I'm really grateful that you've accepted, Dr. Umarov, this collaboration. And I also want to thank Dr. Nilufar Sakhi, the founder and president of Andiana Foundation, and Shahina Khan Bahramova, who is a student from Uzbekistan at the University of Notre Dame, with concentration on peace studies, who has done an excellent work in facilitating and supporting the organization of this event. And I also want to thank our colleagues, Ari and Kate Chester and the communications team at the University of Notre Dame at the Kroc Institute, who did a fantastic job in organizing this. This conversation is important because, excuse me, it delves into the contrast between how the region engages with Afghanistan under the Taliban and how the West does. Afghanistan is currently isolated from much of the global financial system because the Taliban rules the country. But nations in South and Central Asia, as well as China, excuse me, they seem to have made efforts to continue their economic projects in the country. A recent example is the Prime Minister of Uzbekistan's visit to Kabul, and where he signed an agreement worth more than $2 billion. So these projects and agreements raise important questions about the delicate balance between economic collaboration and the political realities of engaging with the Taliban. Today, we have a distinguished panel of experts from Afghanistan and Uzbekistan who will analyze these questions and provide their insights. And I sincerely thank our panelists, Mr. Suleiman bin Shah, Hamza, and Islam Khan, who have joined us from Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. But without further ado, let me ask Shahina Khan Bahramova to introduce our distinguished moderator, and then we will get into the discussion. I wish you all a great one.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, dear colleagues. I'd like to start our webinar with a simple reminder. As we gather today during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, it's an important reminder for all of us about the interconnectedness of our shared struggle for equality and peace. While our focus today is on regional development and stability, it's important to acknowledge the global nature of gender-based violence. It's crucial to amplify the voices of women peace builders, and advocate for their inclusion everywhere. And before we begin, I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan and express our solidarity with Afghan people, particularly women and girls. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed moderator for today's webinar, Dr. Akram Umarov. He is a distinguished academic and policy practitioner, currently serving as the first Vice Rector of the University of World Economy and Diplomacy. He's a Fulbright scholar and amazing researcher who has dedicated his career to bridging the gap between academia and policymaking. His research focuses on security studies, conflict management, public diplomacy, and development studies in Central Asia, Afghanistan, and former Soviet space. And Dr. Umarov has made he still contributes to shaping policy discussions, informing decision-making processes in Uzbekistan. So his presence, insights, and expertise will undoubtedly enrich our today's discussion. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Umarov.
Thank you, Shahina Khan, for very kind introduction, and I'm very grateful to our colleagues and partners, Mr. Dostiar, and all staff members from the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies, at the Notre University, and it's a real output of our recent discussion about partnership opportunities. And I'm very glad to see that we already started producing specific results from this conversation. So we have an excellent range of speakers, panelists today, and not putting for a long time, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Sulaiman bin Shah, who is an economic analyst and former Deputy Minister of Commerce in Afghanistan. He received his MA degree in the Military Institute of International Studies, and he worked he assisted the government of Afghanistan to promote investment opportunities and attract foreign direct investments. He also led multiple teams to enhance Afghanistan's exports to increasingly diversified set of regional and international markets. He has also been on multiple assignments for various international development institutions. And I would like to welcome Mr. Bin Shah for his speech. And let us, considering our time limit, let us try to limit our introductory remarks. I would like to propose to have remarks rather than a complete speech because of the time limits. I would like to kindly ask all our panelists to limit themselves like 7-8 minutes. And there will be one minute left. I will kind of raise my hand to remind you about the timing. Please, Mr. Bin Shah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good evening to wherever you are. It's my distinct pleasure to be part of this event and very humbled for the kind introduction, Doctor. Thank you so much. I think the regional economic engagement in the region is unfortunately a mixed story, as always. Before 2021, after 2021, there has been very important structural political issues that hampers the advancement of regional connectivity in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, even now, if we look, we can say that there has been really good attempts at moving forward the economic diplomacy, but the question or the debate is still there, how these efforts have been effective or not. And I think that's a question for the debate. But if we look quickly at the regional capitals, Kabul does not really enjoy a good warm moment with Islamabad right now, one of its biggest trade partners in the region. And we also have to then acknowledge the nature of South Asian politics. It's a home for two nations that are nuclear power. They have always sort of prioritized economic security or economic issues. And some of the problem, engaging with Afghanistan and doing business with Afghanistan comes from that political security angle. Towards the north, Afghanistan still enjoys a really good relationship, particularly with Tashkent, Uzbekistan, probably the most pragmatic approach in the region that has taken so far by countries is Uzbekistan, by extending all its support that it possibly can in the current landscape, if may I say, with regional dimensions and international dimensions, considering also the limitations as well. So pretty good job on that front. But Kabul still, enjoys friendly relations with its South Asian partners, China as well, Iran, and as well as Turkmenistan. There has been a lot of progress in talks with Tajikistan. But I guess it's a long journey for Kabul. Despite the political regime or rule that we have in Afghanistan, I think it's also important to understand the business ecosystems. Currently, the Afghanistan's business ecosystem is under a siege. Financial sanctions, I call them useless sanctions because they have not proved to be useful enough. In fact, the brunt of the sanctions is just borne by the common people because it gets down to that level. Those who the targeted sanctions, they have not produced any substantial results as per their objectives. And at the same time, I think we also have to acknowledge how infrastructure remains in Afghanistan or in the region, let's say. So for regional economic engagement, it's very important to have good infrastructure. And unfortunately, we also have a lot of lacking, not just in Afghanistan, but also in the region. We have a recent example in terms of CPAC. CPAC received a lot of financial assistance, a lot of financial support, but the economic gains are still not very much visible for the people of Pakistan or that particular region. So in short, projects do not bring connectivity. It's the integration of system that brings connectivity. And unfortunately, Afghanistan is not connected, or the region is not connected on that level. There are political issues, the issues of education, ban on education, political recognition, banks not working normally, and the inability of Afghan traders doing business with the rest of the world, and big investors actually afraid of reputational consequences if they invest in Afghanistan right now. This all comes into play in the regional politics. Iran and Middle East, Pakistan and India, China and the rest of the world. This whole comes into play when we talk about regional economic engagement and the possibility of a real economic connectivity in the region. So yeah, I think I'll take a pause there, Doctor, making it very short for you, and I would love to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Binshar. It was really time within our time framework, and thanks a lot for this initial remarks. Maybe we will come back to the questions later on. And now I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, to the Mr. Hamza Baltaev, who is the head of the Center for Afghanistan and South Asia Studies at the Institute for Advanced International Studies, University of World Economy and Diplomacy. Hamza has been working at this institute for the last almost 2 years, and he oversees research and analysis on the region, contributes to the development of various analytical reports and outputs. He is now a very active participant in various events focused on regional security issues. Before joining the institute, Mr. Baltaev served in various roles within the Ministry of Internal Affairs, mostly focusing on counterterrorism and extremism issues. He holds degrees from Academy of Internal Affairs of Uzbekistan and Higher School of Strategic Analysis and Forecasting, and also War Studies Department of the King's College in London. So please, Hamza, the floor is yours. So I think we are expecting from you more the vision from Central Asia, how the things are going on in Afghanistan after Taliban takeover, and how the engagement is seen and perceived in the region. Please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Umar, for such a profound introduction about my small contribution to the Institute and to the university and my previous jobs. Today, I'm going to speak a little bit about the relationship between Central Asian republics in Afghanistan, the Taliban ruled Afghanistan, how it's developing, and what kind of impacts they have the livelihoods of Afghan people and both the people of Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. Well, in my perspective, there are several key takeaways from contemporary relations between Central Asian republics and Taliban government in Afghanistan. First of all, the diplomatic engagement with Taliban is a priority for almost all Central Asian republics after the Taliban takeover in 2021. The second one, for the time being, the relations are most driven by economic pragmatism rather than old security concerns. And third, the Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan approach towards Taliban are sort of a reflections of concerns they have with regard to both Taliban and general geopolitical situation in the world, as Russian war efforts in Ukraine is intensifying. So that kind of developments definitely affecting the Kazakhstan's decisions and Kazakhstan's foreign policy decisions towards having a good relations in establishing the economic and pragmatic relations with Taliban in Afghanistan. And the fourth is, despite the initial indifference in approach on the part of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan towards Taliban's advancement to the power in Afghanistan in 2021, Dushanbe has since been sort of rectifying its position towards Taliban. As we all know, initial reaction of Dushanbe to the 2021 events was extremely negative. Later on, Tajikistan even accepted, initially Tajikistan even accepted certain number of Afghan refugees from bordering regions and even hosted openly anti-Taliban conferences in Dushanbe. Nevertheless, Tajikistan has somehow been changing its position over time and even slowly been sending the Afghan refugees back to where they came from. The fifth is Uzbekistan's approach. I'm referring to the sort of Uzbekistan's pragmatic and economic-driven relations with Taliban in Afghanistan. Uzbekistan's approach is even interesting, as it's mainly driven by Tashkent's concerns over the fast-track construction of Khushtepe Canal by an unrecognized Taliban government. Interestingly, even though the Taliban government is not recognized by international community, it is, I think, Uzbekistan's best interest to create a certain leverage to steer its relations with Afghanistan. Therefore, the current economic convergence with Taliban's Afghanistan can best be explained through Tashkent's grievances with regard to the canal construction and its potential impact on agricultural sector of the country, which is Uzbekistan. So I think these five the takeaways, I think can best explain the Central Asian republics the approach towards Afghanistan. But there are so many other things on the field of security relations. But I think I'm going to stop here and give the floor for the next speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Binshar demonstrated us a very good sample of on timing for the event. So our panelists are now getting even more disciplined and to finalize their initial remarks in a limited way. So let's move forward, and I'll come back with a few questions later on. The next panelist is Dr. Nilüfer Saki, who is a co-organizer, the president of Andiana Foundation, co-organizer of this event. She is a distinguished scholar and practitioner in the fields of international affairs, security studies, and peace building. As a president and founder of the Andiana Foundation, she has dedicated her career to promoting peace, human rights, and social justice. She is at the same time professorial lecturer at the Elliott School of International Affairs, George Washington University, and non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. So her research interests include security, geopolitics of peace, peacemaking, and peace building. So Dr. Saki, the floor is yours. We're expecting you maybe some recipes on how to bring peace and stability to Afghanistan.
Wow, that's a different very, very difficult expectation. Right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for having me here. Thank you for other co-organizers, Kroc, and the other colleagues who put together this webinar. As we are going through 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, let me start with reminding everyone that girls are still not going to school in Afghanistan. And this is a big deal. This is a severe crisis from my lens. And I would see that as a severe violence against women in Afghanistan. And this era, girls are still not going to school. I think that should be enough for all the activism that should happen in relation to Afghanistan. So my solidarity with women of Afghanistan and girls at this particular time. So in relation to the Afghanistan and its region, well, as all of us have been following Afghanistan since the collapse of the republic and the takeover of the Taliban, there's been confrontation of Afghanistan with the regional countries, South Asia, Central Asia, Iran, and all others. So the relationship started with confrontation, in particular, if you talk about Central Asia, with the Tajikistan, the issue with the trade and transit, the track issues, if we all remember, in 2022, then that started with real confrontation. And then the recruitment of some Jamaat Ansarullah in Badakhshan by the Taliban security forces. So that created kind of confrontation and tension between Tajikistan and Afghanistan. Going forward with water, we have seen relationship with Uzbekistan was another confrontation. And not really with the far neighbors, but at least with these three neighbors, two neighbors in particular, and then three Turkmenistan also. We have seen the relationship started with confrontation. I think the countries in Central Asia, they are using the policy of contentment with Afghanistan. They don't have a choice, right? They are sharing borders, as we all know, and there is no way that they would isolate themselves and disconnect with Afghanistan at this particular time, because that's going to impact them severely, security-wise and economically as well, and particularly security-wise. We have seen in 1980s, we have seen in 1990s that how radicalization and extremism expelled from Afghanistan and spread through the countries in Central Asia that impacted the communities and people there, and overall how that could be a threat to the sustainability of the administration's regime in Central Asian states. So therefore, it's a very interest-based approach that, of course, countries have always with one another. In particular, the neighbors, the northern neighbors with Afghanistan, they don't have a choice except to have an engagement with Afghanistan, regardless of who is in power. Taliban is in power or whoever is in power. That's not an issue. The issue is their own interest, which is security, which is radicalization, and preventing radicalization, promoting security, and all. So for all this to happen, the pragmatic approach that that other speaker were talking about is one of the strategies that we have seen from last 3 years Central Asian states, in particular Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan have adopted. And that is to promote peace and security through economic engagement. And I met a few of the diplomats there in Uzbekistan as well, that is part of their foreign policy strategy too. So it's not something out of their foreign policy aspects. So that's promote security, stability, and peace through economic reintegration and engagement. And that's how they are doing. That's how they have been taking baby steps after the Taliban takeover, particularly Uzbekistan. They started facilitation of humanitarian assistance, and they moved on with more smaller projects, and now with the mega projects that they have in mind. The same, but let's not forget that there are the countries, the northern countries, and they are fragile by themselves. They cannot extend so much support. They cannot provide so much facilities. They have very limited resources to provide, and that trade and transit could be one of the aspects. But the rest, there shouldn't be a lot of optimism on this new economic engagement with Central Asia that Afghanistan has, that it could generate something substantial. I don't think it could, because these countries by themselves, they are dependent and relying for their own security and economic finances on others. So, but overall, that's the strategy they adopted from day one of the Taliban takeover. But the last point I want to stop, because there's a lot to talk, I would leave for the question and answer. The last point is that they do, with the 5 states of Central Asia, they have presence in Afghanistan. But let's not also forget, they never recognized the Taliban regime. And always, whenever there was a meeting, I was following what happened at the meeting. After the meeting, there was a diplomat coming up and saying, well, it's just for the economic engagement. We don't recognize the regime. We don't recognize the Taliban because of certain conditions like education for girls, inclusive government, and all the other aspects that they mention after that. So it is this kind of engagement, I think it is conditional. This kind of engagement, I don't think is sustainable, even if it's economic engagement. And this type of engagement, from my lens, I would see fragile because of lack of strategy inside Afghanistan, and also lack of a recognized legitimate government in Afghanistan. I think that would also impede the sustainability of such engagement going forward. I stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Saki, for your remarks. And let's continue the flow of our panelists. The next one is Mr. Islampon Gafarov, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Advanced International Studies. His current research topic is about the U.S. foreign policy priorities in South Asia. So he's touching also Afghanistan issues very much. And he is a young, talented Uzbek researcher who is now actively working on researching the South Asia region and its connectivity with Central Asia. Islampon, the floor is yours. So we are expecting you from more insights about specific type of engagement from Central Asia and Uzbekistan in more details. And then we can also speak a little bit about some external actors who are affecting this engagement between Central Asia and Afghanistan. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Umarov. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good evening, dear colleagues. So I will continue the ideas of my colleague, Hamza Boltaev. And so when in 2021, Taliban came to the power, they collided with huge economic problems. And but nowadays it seems like the economy of Afghanistan stabilized. So it's very difficult. Like there is the rise in Afghan economy, but we can say that its economy stabilized. And what kind of measures Taliban government did for this achievement? First of all, they improved the taxation system in Afghanistan, which became the main source of all budget. The second one is anti-corruption movements in the state. So nowadays, Taliban government invite many high officials in the Ashraf Ghani government. So we can say, like in Afghanistan nowadays, exists kind of meritocracy. The third thing, like Afghan government nowadays working on huge projects. The first, we can call it like TAPI gas pipeline. The second is CASA project. The third is Trans-Afghan corridor. Nowadays, Afghan government improved more than 85 roads. And in the further, they want to improve around 100 roads along the state. And the last huge project, which Mr. Boltaev mentioned, it's a huge Koshtepa canal project, which is considered to improve the northern part of Afghanistan. So what kind of aims Taliban government has by conducting these giant projects? First is to improve socio-economic life in Afghanistan. The second is unify all regions in Afghanistan. So to unify the north with south and east with the west and all the national minorities in Afghanistan. The third, in our opinion, to improve the image of Afghanistan in the vision of great stakeholders and of Eurasia and Western countries. And the improving of image of Afghanistan give, first of all, recognition of the government, which Afghanistan Taliban government nowadays eager to get. And the second one, to attract more and more investments to the state. Nowadays, we can see the most active diplomatic activity by the part of Taliban government. So they have they are developing their economic relations with China, with Russian Federation, with all Central Asian states, with South Caucasus states, with Iran, and Arab worlds also. And nowadays, there is also change in a good way by side of India towards Afghan government. So I wanted to continue and give some prognosis by side of Central Asian states, but I think I have time only for Uzbekistan. So how Uzbekistan look to these giant projects of Afghanistan and the economic policy of Taliban? First of all, Uzbekistan see Afghanistan as a way accessing the seaports of Pakistan, like Gwadar, Karachi, and Qasim, and others. That's why Uzbekistan investing for the developing of Trans-Afghan corridor. The second one, in our opinion, Uzbekistan, like if Trans-Afghan corridor will work, like Uzbekistan will also transform it into transit zone between north and south and north. So in this way, like for example, Russian Federation or Kazakhstan are very interesting to export their goods, gas and oil products to the South Asian states like India and Pakistan. So in this case, Uzbekistan also and all Central Asian states will transform it into a kind of a transit zone in Euro-Asian continent. And the third very important issue is the issue of security, like stable and Afghanistan with a stable economy. It's a guarantee of security, not only in Central Asia, but in South Asia. And the last one, in our opinion, like by improving the socio-economic life in Afghanistan, in our opinion, Uzbekistan also want to improve kind of image about all STAN countries, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and others. Like if one of the STAN countries have kind of economic problems, in our opinion, like world society will think like all STAN countries have like undeveloped economy. So by improving the socio-economic life in Afghanistan, like all STAN countries can improve their image in the vision of world society. So that's why, in our opinion, Uzbekistan nowadays tries to improve and helping to Afghanistan government. So I guess we can continue other details in our discussion part. Thank you.
Thank you for very disciplined timing for all our speakers. Despite for quick remarks, they were quite interesting and thoughtful. And I would like maybe to start with a round of questions from my side. Then we can move for several questions which we received in a chat. Maybe I'll start with Mr. Bin Shah as a first panelist. For Central Asia, it would be interesting to hear, in general, how this engagement from Central Asian side is felt in a daily life, if it's felt, of course, how it's perceived, this active engagement from Central Asian countries or support which is coming to Afghanistan. Do you have any ideas about this? And to our next speaker, Mr. Boltaev, so we mentioned about this active engagement and participation from most of the Central Asian countries, even Tajikistan, despite some slight differences in its positioning, still have some engagement with Taliban on many economic issues. So do you see any risks associated with this economic engagement from Central Asian countries, especially from the ones which are more keen to do so? So let's say Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan is now promising big investments into the country and increasing the economic presence. what kind of risks we should take into account while assessing these developments. For Dr. Saki, maybe it would be interesting to hear you. You mentioned about that the women are now out of education and suppressed by the Taliban government. What do you think? What can region contribute to making their life easier and better? Is there any region-specific approach, or can some common history, culture, traditions somehow contribute in the process of finding some understanding with Taliban and finding some better solutions for the lives of females in Afghanistan? And finally, to Mr. Ghafarov, you mentioned about the projects, but as I said while introducing to you, it would be interesting to know, considering some of your research outputs, recent ones, to briefly inform us, how does this, in general, geopolitical dynamics in the region influence security and stability in Afghanistan? Some positioning of some external actors. Thank you. Please, let's start from Mr. Bin Shah.
Thank you, and quite an interesting question. I think it would be really nice if our Uzbek colleagues would answer that question. But to me, I think there are a couple of things very much important. Before even I answer how Uzbekistan's support is seen and felt by people in Afghanistan, let's also see why there is a shift towards regionalization. Dr. Sahi mentioned that the interests majorly drive these decisions, but what are the factors that drive those interests? And I think we should look a little bit in a bigger picture. So post-COVID-19 is a very different world. The cost of doing business, the cost of financing, the cost of transportation has increased. The way businesses are conducted in regions has changed. Protocols has changed, procedures have changed, so much changes. And rightfully, Uzbekistan's effort to be connected with the rest of the world because of its challenge, it's not just landlocked, it's double landlocked country. And I think that's also majorly driving that interest. But at the same time, if we look at the region, we have a very fractured region. Both central, if you look on both sides, I mean, I talked about South Asia. It's the least integrated region in the world, despite the fact that Pakistan and India alone, they're a global market. If you look at the population, if you look at the economic scale, the activity, the turnover of exports, but again, highly distant when it comes to the relationship between those two countries affecting the region. Similarly, we have a crisis right now in the Middle East on Palestine, the genocide that is happening. And that also in some way has an effect on our region because, Iran is there. And so in retrospect, if we see, there are so many other things connected to just have this regional economic engagement. The other, I think, main sort of reason that I would say we all need to consider is also the global focus. It's mainly in Ukraine, it's mainly in Gaza, and the global powers such as the US and EU. They have a very limited attention span to the region, and particularly to Afghanistan. What's happening in Afghanistan is also feeding to that lesser attention policy of the West. But I'm mentioning West because of the financing side. A lot of these regional projects, mega regional projects that Afghanistan is part of and Central Asian republics are part of, are financed by, or there were commitments before for financing by these IFIs coming from the West majorly. So that is also playing a key role why Tashkent is so much motivated or has the appetite to do things on a regional level, and whatever it can. I would say it is felt in our daily lives. If you look at our energy imports, Uzbekistan commits $50 million in the transportation costs that the energy comes to Afghanistan. Uzbekistan is investing in a project that would connect a 500 kVA transmission line from Uzbekistan until Kabul and to the east. This project will be completed in 2026. Uzbekistan has already supported quite a number of work and the feasibility assessments required for the Trans-Afghan Railway project, and it is still pushing the negotiations for the restructuring of the financial arrangement for that project. And I think that's a vital project, not for the regional economics, but also for just daily life and for people to be connected, to be able to do things on their own. Termis Business Complex, we recently inaugurated, is another project. It's a free 15 days visa regime for Afghans. They can take and seek medical services. They can operate their businesses from there. And Afghan students can receive education. I've visited the complex, one of another sort of major project that supports the Afghan people. In total, if we see in the last 5 years, I think the investments have been around $250 million. I agree, not a big number. But I think the appetite to do in Afghanistan will only grow if Afghanistan also has efficient business ecosystem. So it's not just the Taliban problem, it's not just politics, but also the ability of doing business in the country and with the country. Unfortunately, right now, it's a siege, as I say it, with financial sanctions, with inability of doing business with the region. It's a siege. Our private sector, the Afghan private sector, which also includes women, by the way, with having chamber offices in major zones of the country, everybody facing the inability of doing banking transactions. And I think that also affects trickle down to in employment, investment decisions, operational planning. So you see, we have to look into the regional connectivity agenda with Afghanistan, or the interest of doing business in Afghanistan, more from a sort of a realistic perspective, what is possible and what is not possible. So it's not just the political side of it or of the equation, but also the capabilities. And I think in this regard, I deeply appreciate the Uzbek approach, whether that is pragmatic, whether that is interest-based or whatever. It's working and it's good for our people. It's no war, it's peace, it's negotiations. The Uzbek colleagues always in the last 3 years, whenever I've met them, including the envoy for Afghanistan, Mr. Ergashov, they mentioned that we do not want to continue seeing Afghanistan as a threat, but rather a strategic opportunity, because it has not resulted for many, many years. Seeing Afghanistan as a threat did not give us any results, And so this change in approach is quite interesting. I think it's quite effective, and this should continue. Yes, they're not recognizing the government in Afghanistan, but they're having tough negotiations as well, as they spoke to me on several issues. And I think they have the right, and everybody has the right to talk. Talking to me for Afghanistan is good. It's great for my people. War is not good. Bloodshed is not good. Violence is not good. And I do appreciate what was said for the girls of Afghanistan. We as men in Afghanistan also acknowledge the situation and the difficulty, but I think it would require movements, people, constant interactions, and constant push, civil push, intellectual push, all sorts of push to change things in Afghanistan. Things were not great in Afghanistan. Things are not great in Afghanistan. But I think we have a chance to start a journey, at least with the regional countries, towards that point that we all aim for Afghanistan, or we dream for Afghanistan. So I'll take a pause and continue to answering any other questions.
Thank you. I would kindly ask our other panelists to limit their comments by maybe just 2 minutes, because we also received several questions from the online audience, which is following our discussion. Please, Hamza.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. I'm going to just briefly try to answer your question. So your question were about what kind of risks so the Central Asian governments might have with their sort of pragmatic relations towards Afghanistan and the Taliban government. I think those kind of risks are conscious risks, and the governments of Central Asia, especially I would highlight Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. So the risks they are taking with their approach towards Afghanistan as a pragmatic relations, mostly driven from their economic interests. And those economic interests, the risk associated with those, the economic pragmatism might be the legality of the situation. For example, Afghanistan, the Taliban government is not recognized. So what kind of the economic interests or your the contracts you might have or investments you have in Afghanistan, who is going to protect those type of the interests or those type of investments on the part of Kazakhstan, and the Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, when the government of Taliban is not internationally recognized? So that's the first part. And the second part is, so as we mentioned, the relationship between Uzbekistan, especially with the Taliban government, and generally with Afghanistan, has been developing on the side of pragmatism and economic relations since 2016 and now. So we're not saying that the security equation is not there. The security equation has always been there, but the pragmatism and the economic interests are taking over the most part of the relationship between Central Asia and between Uzbekistan and the Taliban government. That might take, I would say, the legal side of the issue with regard to non-recognized condition of Taliban might be the main risk from Afghanistan, from that relationship going forward.
Thank you. Dr. Saki.
Yeah, just to answer your question, Akram, I just go back to what Mr. Bin Shah and Mr. Hamza talk about. Very relevant, I think. I think we're on the same line on this. That's why I said in my earlier remarks that this engagement, from my lens, seems to be a fragile engagement, and it cannot go anywhere unless there shouldn't be an enabling environment for this economic engagement. And the enabling environment, our speakers already referred to that. That's of course, first of all, recognition comes in, because for any contracts, mega contracts to move on, you need a recognized government to sign it, fine, and that has all the international and global repercussions. So I think that is not there. That enabling environment is not there for sustained economic engagement, and that's why my earlier remarks was based on this technicalities that I see has not worked out for economic engagement. It's very reactionary kind of engagement to settle the day-to-day issues of security, of border, of trade and transit, but not really a long-term vision for economic engagement, as Uzbekistan pragmatically puts it. That's a strategy of their foreign policy. So that is why I think I would see that for such an engagement to work out. You asked me previously, Akram, about what could be done. I fully agree with the whole concept of regionalization. There should be a regional mechanism in place, a regional mechanism, a sustained regional mechanism to tackle some of the main political issues. And that political issues, unless and until one is resolved, I think we should not expect actually a very sustained economic engagement of this country. It will be very day-to-day and reactionary. Now, one of the and I think by Mr. Bin Shah also is highlighted, and I second what he said, that political economic prosperity, for me, I see that depends on a political development. So they are interconnected. For any political economic prosperity to happen, economic development to happen, there should be a political development before that. And I think we haven't, Afghanistan hasn't reached that stage at this point, and it has been always there. I don't blame now the 3 years of chaos, but even before that, engagements were not really strategized based on a political vision. That's why TOPI did not work. That's why TUTAP did not work. That's why CASA 1000 at some point got disrupted. We had all these mega projects during Republic II, but that did not operationalize because of so many aspects, lack of political will, security concerns, and so many others, that because of an overall FVC, there was a lack of political strategy to deal with those mega economic investment plan. So I see that still exists. That's why I said, regardless of who is in power, the regional issue has always been there with Afghanistan, and bilateral engagement does not really resolve issue. That is why I foresee a regional mechanism to happen, where these countries can negotiate some of the main terms, can put forward a plan and strategy and implement it, execute it, rather only give be a rhetoric of politicians. So with that, I get to your question of how it does it impact women in general or no. Well, look, I mean, we know that under such a regime who doesn't even promote women at workforce and women in education, you cannot expect really a women agency to be developed in economic development or other. Yes, indirectly, when families are when the job creations happen in country through such projects, the life conditions of family will grow, and then there would be some indirect impact on the families in general. But I see not particularly on women, because at this point there are some fundamental issues that needs to be resolved in relation to women at workforce, women in education. So women, if they even step in such, they cannot first of all step in such project. They will be confined to very small income generating processes or projects, which a man would be leading those projects. So overall, women again will not be really enjoying the rights of their economic participation, or the right to really participate in economic project as a whole, and that will not build their agency. So I think I would see that it would have an indirect impact on the families, that women can be partly impacted positively by those life conditions if they improve through such economic projects, and again through job creation, of course. But in particular, women to be benefited from this project at this particular time, when they are banned from education, when they are limited workforce to them, I think I wouldn't see so much of impact on their lives.
Thank you. Islam Khan, maybe quickly. We have a range of questions from the audience.
Thank you, Dr. Umarov. So regarding your question, I want to add to the ideas of Mr. bin Shah. So Afghanistan historically was a link between regions, Central and South Asia, not an obstacle. And nowadays, like developing the giant projects like TAPI, like Trans-Afghan Corridor and CASA, they will improve and revive not only the connectivity between Central and South Asia, but also will develop the whole relations in the Euro-Asian supercontinent. So it will link the main stakeholders like Russia, China, India, and other states like Iran, and that these states can easily develop their economic relations within the Euro-Asia. For example, nowadays, Russia export their wheat products to the Pakistan, mostly through the sea roads. But like we are living in the same continent, so developing like giant project like Trans-Afghan Corridor through the Afghanistan, of course, will improve the Russian relations with Pakistan, and Indian relations with Russia, Iran's relations with China, or Chinese relations with Iran. So developing of these giant projects will improve not only the regional stability, but also improve the stability and economic development within the whole of the supercontinent. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll try to combine several questions and ask you to respond. We have several on recognition, Taliban recognition. Maybe I'll ask Mr. Boltaev and Mr. bin Shah quickly to react on this. So the question is, as Taliban is already engaging with the region in economic and having diplomatic relations, do they really need some formal recognition? And very linked to it, what kind of mechanisms can regional powers use to engage with Taliban without kind of legitimizing some unfair things, which is Taliban promoting, which is for which it's criticized for. Please, maybe you can quickly react. Yes, Hamza.
Me? I think that's a fantastic question. The fantastic question, but without official recognition, as one of our panelists, probably Nilüfer Han mentioned, without formal recognition, any relationship is going to be so fragile. But anyways, when I say we, I mean the Central Asian republics should have certain relationship, the pragmatic relationship with Taliban, Afghanistan. And Uzbekistan is going to be forefront of that relationship with signing the 2.5 billion worth of trade turnover last year. But Uzbekistan, why Uzbekistan is going to be forefront of that pragmatic relationship? Because Uzbekistan have the water the problem that might create the Taliban government might create. But we don't recognize Taliban government, and without recognition and without legal framework, we cannot. The Uzbekistan government cannot solve the water issue, and that's why Uzbekistan is trying to create some kind of economic leverage with their relationship with Taliban government, and as a result, that economic convergence. So Uzbekistan can say the Taliban government, hey, look, if you don't want to lose the Uzbekistan, the relationship, the Uzbekistan's market or Uzbekistan investment from Afghanistan and from Uzbekistan side and from Afghanistan, so you have to have kind of abide with certain the promises, even though those promises not legally the framework or legally stamped. Thank you.
Yes, please. Just 1 minute if possible. Sorry
I'll try my best.
Time is coming up there.
Just 2-3 points quickly. Recognition, maybe some people would say it's quasi-recognition, but I think this whole recognition in the thought around it can start with Doha Agreement, right? That sort of gave the status to the Taliban to be on the other side of the table. We also saw the current Chinese ambassador presenting credentials in Kabul, but without recognizing the government formally. That was another sort of interesting point for all of us. And I think so on and so forth. I can name you so many of these moments which seems like maybe some people are getting into this argument saying maybe formal recognition is not such a big issue at this point in time, specifically after the US elections. We also saw a lot of bipolarity in the EU elections, if you were watching and following. So this whole global environment and the regional environment is sort of giving the space for this argument. International frameworks have been discredited with what happened in Ukraine and Gaza. So there is not a lot of credibility as well. And I fully agree with Dr. Nilüfer to have a regional mechanism. And what can be that regional mechanism? I think for a start, there has to be a political process started with Afghanistan. It can be the heart of Asia. It can be another regional, framework, but there has to be some activation in this regard. A sort of clear conversations, very transparent exchanges, and assigning milestones towards that. Not confrontation, but rather collaboration, and how we can move forward, listening to everybody and considering all that is needed to be there. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And unfortunately, the time is coming to the end, and we have just 2 minutes to finalize the session. Maybe I'll make a quick key takeaways. We have a range of questions, but I think they will help us to work jointly, maybe if you don't mind, on some joint paper at the output of this online discussion, and we can try to respond to the rest of the question in those in that paper in the future. So key takeaways, I think we agreed in general. There are, of course, some issues in the process, but engagement in general is important. At least we need to keep continuing supporting the people in Afghanistan and providing some economic aid and humanitarian support to them. But at the same time, of course, we need to always take into account the situation with human rights and female rights and women empowerment in Afghanistan. And always all this engagement should end up with closer understanding of these realities from both sides, Central Asia and Afghanistan, and hopefully it will work out. So economic engagement should lead to some bigger engagement on terms of how to develop the future of Afghanistan. And we hope this kind of close coordination will be helpful in this regard. So quickly, this is my key takeaways. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Dostiar to finalize our session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Omarov and the distinguished panelists. It was an engaging conversation. I just want to say thank you to all of you and to all the people who attended the webinar. And we will follow up. I wish everyone a great day and night, depending on your time zones. Once again, thank you.